I am honored right now to have with me that bespoke boulevardier, the sultan of cephalogy, the sartorial Svengali, and that rakish raconteur, and the author of this incredible tome, this book, that I beseech, I entreat, I importune you to purchase or steal or borrow, The Making of the President 2016, How Donald Trump Orchestrated a Revolution. Roger Stone, welcome and congratulations on this incredible work.
Lionel, thank you very much, and I know we had some misconnections, so I'm very grateful to be here.
First, I must talk about you and your role in this. I am fascinated by the theory, the plays, the tack, the caroms, the approaches. What was your role in this incredible victory of our grand republic?
Well, I, of course, am a lifelong supporter of Donald Trump. I wanted him to run for president as early as 1988. Wanted him to run again in 2000. Came closest in 2012. Unlike any other political figure I have worked for, he is not scripted. He is not coached. He is not handled. He is not molded. What you see is what you get. There were many times in the campaign that he would say things that I would have said differently.
Yes.
Almost always makes his point, but I might have said differently. But the idea of handling him is just not, it was never, ever going to work because he's not a politician at heart. I made a decision in August that I could be more effective from the outside than the inside. And the idea, frankly, of clearing the things that I wanted to say and write about the Clintons with someone else was not very appealing to me. I probably made over 600 surrogate speeches for Donald Trump. I did well over 500 interviews. I think I was a very effective surrogate. But I preferred to be, outside the tent pissing in as opposed to
Precisely.
Inside the tent out.
Now you, Roger Stone, you recognize right away something that I recognized, not out of any genius on my part, but because I'm a master of the obvious. And that is that there are various platforms today and news delivery systems that are so effective. And one of the outlets that you turn to is a mutual friend of ours, a man who I have incredible respect for, is Alex Jones. And he is able to mobilize a contingent, a cadre of just American voters who absolutely tapped in perfectly to Donald Trump's message. You were unafraid to approach that particular platform, among others. What were your thoughts then?
Well, a very interesting piece on this in yesterday's New York Times, which you probably saw. I mean, between online viewers in real time, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, podcast, and the simulcast on 212 radio stations, Alex Jones is getting an audience that dwarfs Fox and CNN between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock every day, 5 days a week. Those are enormous numbers. So those who say, oh, Alex Jones and Sandy Hook and Alex Jones and 911, so what? In other words, this is a news channel.
Right.
If you're interviewed there, that doesn't mean you agree with everything that's ever been said there. If I go on CNN with somebody as inarticulate as Wolf Blitzer, that doesn't mean that I agree with Wolf on everything he ever thought or said. It's an absurd, elitist notion. And you can't sneeze at 11 or 12 million citizens because, as you point out, these are the foot soldiers of the Trump revolution.
Precisely.
These are the forgotten Americans, the silent majority. In this election, Lionel, I really think the pendulum finally swung, and the tipping point was reached. Now that a majority of Americans are getting their advice here on their handheld device and no longer on the television set in the living room, and the fact that if you want to watch television through your device, you've got to go through the net, and as you go through the net, you quickly realize that, oh my God, Breitbart News is far more accurate than CNN,
Yes, yes.
or Alex Jones is far better than Fox, or all of them are much better than Geraldo Rivera. So it has opened the door to the fact that in 2016, the mainstream media lost their monopoly on the dissemination of political information. I mean, I've written a book on the Kennedy assassination, and I don't want to get sidetracked on a broad topic, other than to say, when there were only 3 national networks, having one narrative and no alternatives was fairly easy. Today, with the internet, talk radio, shows like this, there are thousands of outlets. That makes having only one narrative almost impossible.
And by the way, if I may, your piece, your dissection of LBJ's role, specifically that of highlighting Mac Wallace, and your, I don't want to call it a debate, but your very interesting discussions with Posner regarding this, absolute internet gold. And what I always remember and recall is what Gore Vidal said. He said, "I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm a conspiracy analyst." And that word, by virtue of the fact that it was weaponized in 1967, at least by CIA, in response to the Warren Report, goes to show you that that directive is still alive today. Let me ask you this. We are in a revolution, Roger Stone. We are right now, for the first time, this president, and I've got to be honest, I have a hard time saying President Trump. Because I just thought there's no way that Hillary Clinton machine is going to allow this, or Soros. It's nice to think, but you know what? Anybody, and certainly he can become president, but he's defining what the news is, and this is a revolutionary rift. How significant is this, quote, war against the media that he has fired the first salvo or sortie against?
I think it's very significant, and frankly, I think in this case, the politics of polarization works for him. When people in the flyover country see people in the East Coast and the West Coast, not just demonstrating, because demonstrating is fine, throwing rocks, throwing bottles, throwing trash, throwing baggies of urine and baggies of Clorox. I'm referring to the Republican National Convention.
Right.
And again, at the inauguration, that is just pushing people into the Trump camp. I think it is an error, an overplay on the hands of George Soros and others who are paying to foment the violence. But I also think that Trump's redefinition of the media is crucial. He's not going to take any crap. If he feels he's being untreated fairly, he's going to come right at you.
Yes.
He fears nothing. And I think the people they're tired of the mainstream media just being toadies for the establishment.
Absolutely.
And as they look around, what they will find is there is better investigative journalism being done at places like Breitbart and InfoWars and Daily Caller and a dozen other places.
You know, it's funny, Roger Stone, you have been in politics virtually your entire adult life. You're as we refer to yourself as a bespoke in New York and Florida, all over the world, continental, bon vivant. Same with a billionaire, Donald Trump. And yet, what I find so refreshing is that your targeted demographic have been those very people that you call the flyover state, Main Street, the heartland. You used to call them Joe Sixpack almost disparagingly. But the American voter who says, for the longest time, I have been completely ignored. And explain how you spoke directly to these very people and how successfully this particular campaign was.
Well, as you know, Lionel, you never lose your roots. And although I may dress bespoke, my father was a well driller from Westchester County who worked with his hands like a dog in a blue collar job every day of his life. Being a Roman Catholic, growing up in a Catholic Republican household, my family had been Democrats. Eisenhower changed that. By the time both my parents, passed away, they were ardent Republicans. They had started as Roosevelt Democrats. So I have seen it in my own life, the way the Democratic Party has forgotten that they were once the party of the middle class and working people. Now they are the party of minority interest groups, big unions, and the LGBTB community. And they're losing that because we will stand up for gay people against radical Islam, but the Democrats will not. So they're even losing that constituency.
Precisely.
They are a knit together group of special interest groups. They're no longer a political party. But I have to tell you, the other night I made the mistake of going on MSNBC, believing that I would get a fair shake. I extensively went on to talk about my book, but pretty far in, a few minutes into the questioning, Ari Melber wanted to know how I felt about the fact that some say that I am a racist and a bigot and a misogynist based on some things that I have said and how big a problem those things are for the country. In all honesty, they're not nearly as big a problem as snotty television hosts or networks who decide that censorship is a good thing and that they should decide what you can and cannot say. Now, like everybody else, I'm not perfect. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And sure, I've said things from time to time that I regret, and in some cases I've apologized for them. But when television networks start to decide who shall be censored and who shall not, you have a good explanation as to why no one is watching MSNBC.
Precisely. In fact, you would think if I were either Andy Lack or Phil Griffin or whoever's in charge of MSDNC, to be fair, I would tell them whatever you do, you treat Stone like a gentleman, because what I want you to do is we have to recraft and redirect and reformulate this package that we're doing, because we have ratings that rival that of a baby monitor in some cases. We have to do something. So would it not have been the smarter thing, Roger Stone, to at least treat you with feigned, manufactured cordiality and pretend that at least they were giving this book, The Making of the President 2016, a fair shake? Would it have killed them to maybe have someone out there in the heartland say, hey, you know what? This MSNBC, maybe they're okay. Wouldn't that make sense?
Even worse than that. So I have my segment with Melber. We mix it up pretty good. He came on strong, but he wasn't outrageous. I held my own. Then I leave and they go to a panel. They bring up David Korn of Mother Jones magazine and some other jagoff who I've never heard of. And the two of them have a 10-minute segment just trashing me. Now, in all honesty, no one believes anything written in Mother Jones magazine. You talk about your fake news, please. So it was a setup. The great news, Lionel, no one was watching. Put it another way. No one who matters was watching.
Right.
100% of those watching voted for Hillary Clinton. You know what? Up your keister. So,
waxing a bit from my Sicilian heritage there, as we say, which is our salute. Now, let's talk about a couple of things here. There is right now, Roger, this politics of personality. Look at what's happened to Milo. Look at what happened to Bill Maher. Here in New York, I was walking about yesterday, and they had these young folks who were out there protesting, which is terrific. And it seems like what they're into more than anything else is the volume, the personality, the ferocity of the message and messenger versus the platform. What do these people stand for? Donald Trump, and I said this, and by the way, I have gone on the record, I voted for me. I don't believe in parties. I wrote my name in that ballot, so I didn't vote for anybody. And I thought, plus Hillary's it's no way Hillary's going to let this guy. It's stacked against him. But he came out and he talked about jobs. He talked about TPP. He talked about unemployment. He talked about what affected people. I've got friends of mine, Roger, I swear to God, who are Marxists, actual card-carrying Marxists, who said, this man is a revolutionary. For the first time, he's talking about jobs. He's talking about the working man. And I'm saying, is anybody hearing this? He's a revolutionary. He is rending this American fabric. Nobody knows what to do. He's not a Republican. He's not a Democrat. He's talking about issues. What did Hillary Clinton talk about? What was her platform? What was her message? I'm not Trump. Whenever she showed up. This genius actually having a message that affected the heartland. I'm repeating myself, but that's why he won.
Yeah, I think people were ready for straight talk. They were ready for somebody who was, not part of a broken system and not tied to any of the mistakes of the last 30 years. I mean, it occurs to me, even though I have spent most of my adult life as a Republican, that Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, when you get right down to it, they're identical. Nothing changed. Endless war, erosion of civil liberties, massive debt and spending, an immigration system is broken, leaves our neighborhoods and streets unsafe, trade deals that are good for the other guys and terrible for us, sucking the jobs out of the country, and a foreign policy that, unless I'm reading it wrong, is completely designed to prop up and empower our enemies while undercutting our traditional friends. Precisely what Hillary Clinton did in the Middle East. So people are angrier and more fed up with it. They will give Donald Trump a wide berth, I think, to clean up this mess. They're going to get tired of the constant gossip and carping. I mean, does the president wear a tattered bathrobe in the family quarters? Who cares? Who cares? You got to wonder about some of these stories.
Now, let's talk about a couple of things here. About these particular tropes and these memes that are created. For some reason, out of nowhere, and I don't know how this came about, it was said that Donald Trump was somehow connected with Vladimir Putin and Russia. It was said that somehow they either hacked either DNC or Hillary or did something without explaining exactly how they hacked, what they hacked, and how it actually affected the elections. But it was just repeated over and over again by the Minderburn media. To this day, as of today, has anything, Roger Stone, ever been suggested or ever been proved or even insinuated of how the Russians affected this election?
No, that's the great irony of this, which is you have two front-page New York Times stories that say the Trump campaign officials, Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, and some guy named Carter Page, who I always confuse with Clarence Carter, but that's another story.
Patches, I'm defending on. You're right.
Exactly. So, that we were in touch with the Russians, and that there were email traffic and financial transactions that would prove this. Then in their second story, about a week ago, a little less, they said that there were now those things, plus additionally transcripts of intercepted conversations. Well, no member of the Senate or House Intelligence Committee, certainly none of the Republicans, have seen any such documents. The New York Times has seen no such documents. And when the special report went to the president, according to the New York Post, it actually says there are no attachments because the documents are so classified even you can't see them. That's because they don't exist. I was never in touch with any Russian agent of the Russian state, agent of Russian intelligence, anybody fronting for the Russians. I'm going to write a letter to the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Indeed, we need public hearings about this. I would relish the opportunity to testify in public under oath and destroy this canard of Russian influence in this election once and for all. And as far as the Russians hacking the DNC, WikiLeaks didn't even attack the EDC. As you probably know, a diplomat, Craig Murray of the UK, has said that this came from an informant. It was passed to him. He passed it on to WikiLeaks. Attention, New York Times. You have yet to report that. You say over and over again, WikiLeaks hacked the DNC. Assange denies that. The guy who actually was involved with the informant has stepped forward, yet the Times won't come off their fake news narrative.
Now, we talk about this, and here's the dumbest question, but the most important question. Roger Stone, if you know this and I know this, how does this paper of record, and by the way, they talk about RT a lot, foreign-owned, foreign propaganda platform. Well, Carlos Slim owns the New York Times. And Bezos, I guess, owns the Washington Post as some kind of a trinket. But how is it that you know this and I know this, and I think most people in the country know this, but yet the mainstream media have not mentioned this? Do they just ignore it? Do they maybe not understand it? Because, look, if somebody said, I'm sorry.
I guess what it is you see, I was on with this fellow, Mark Thompson, on Sirius the other day. There are actually still people in the country who believe that if the intelligence agencies, the 17, say something, it is automatically true. So when they say, well, we have found evidence of X, Y, and that Stone and okay, fine. Put up or shut up.
Yes.
In other words, well, the CIA says it's true. These are the people who lied about weapons of mass destruction, who lied about torture in the prisons in Iraq, who lied about Benghazi. I mean, their assessments, which is what this all is, are consistently wrong. In fact, I would go the other way. You can't believe virtually anything they say.
Well, you know,
whatsoever.
Roger, I think it was John Pilger says, never believe anything unless until it's officially denied. And we'll talk about, this lack of sophistication. Roger, you talk about the JFK assassination, and that was when I first, I'm still reveling, I'm mind blown over the fact that people are not more upset that nobody seems to care about this. So you and I know that the CIA, and by the way, I think if we took all of the heads of all of the intelligence agencies around the world and we put them in a room together, they would say, of course. We talk about Russian boats spying. Of course, we spy. Angela Merkel suggested, we even said to them, she found out, hey, you're bugging my phone. I know, we do this. You and I think, have enough of sophistication as far as history to know that that's kind of the way that's done. But what's happening right now is this Russophobic, red baiting, Kremlin baiting, this Cold War rhetoric that, and by the way, the reinvention of Ukraine and Crimea by people who last week couldn't find Russia on a map.
Looks like Maxine Waters still can't find it on a map.
right. Or she's talking about North Korea. Right.
No, this is the new McCarthyism.
Precisely.
I know. Here's the deal. If you don't want to go to war over Syria, if you don't want a no-fly zone, which is an invitation for World War III, then you're a traitor to your country. This is the new McCarthyism. I mean, Jerry Nadler can be seen on C-SPAN badgering the FBI director about whether he's opened an investigation into Roger Stone's contact with the Russians on the basis of no evidence whatsoever. Jerry, at long last, have you no sense of decency? What a load.
Thank you, Jack Welch. Now, we're talking about this because there is this, indeed, you so correctly say, a new McCarthyism, but there's also something which really concerned me. How should I read this, Roger Stone? When General Flynn basically started off by saying, we're going to, for the first time, not have, it's been said, not have Russia as a friend, but as a partner. This poses an existential threat to the money grip that NATO has. Wait a minute. You're talking about ratcheting down this Russophobic Russia scare with President Trump saying, I talked to him. I'm not in love with Mr. Putin, but I can deal with him, which a lot of people used to respect under Nixon, Détente, and Reagan. So all of a sudden, Flynn's out. What happened there?
Well, and the real question is, why was the Central Intelligence Agency wiretapping and eavesdropping on the conversations of General Flynn? He's a U.S. citizen and a designated government official. So the leak of the fact that he spoke to the ambassador is a crime punishable by 10 years in prison. And that's a fact. So we now know General Flynn broke no laws. He made the call to set up a call between their president and ours. He gave when the ambassador, according to the transcript section in the New York Times, attempted to bring up sanctions. He got the Jersey brush off from General Flynn. Flynn did nothing wrong. I think firing him or asking him to leave was a mistake.
I agree.
Was a rush to judgment that became a stampede.
You know, Roger, you've said something about this, and I'm so glad you did it. There are many of us who have been watching this for the longest time, and we see and always have seen the deep state, the invisible empire, the hidden empire, the ruling class, the state within a state, whatever you want to call this group of imperialists, Wall Street shills, warmongers, and the like. When I hear Mike Pence going to NATO saying, listen, almost the way it was portrayed that Flynn supposedly called up Russia and said, hey, listen, don't worry about these sanctions. And then, of course, they said, well, the fact that Putin didn't react, that Putin said, don't worry about the sanctions. In fact, it's no big deal. They said, aha. They even talked about a violation of the Logan Act, which nobody's been prosecuted since 1798. But I'm watching Pence now speaking before NATO saying, hey, look, don't worry about it. Okay, don't worry. I'm thinking, wait a minute. When I hear Dennis Kucinich, Charles Krauthammer, and Charles Schumer talk about perhaps a soft coup or a coup within this deep state architecture, I get scared. What say you, sir?
I think you have a legitimate reason to be scared. It's kind of interesting how everyone has forgotten when Obama got caught on an open mic saying to Vladimir Putin, don't worry, once I get into my second term, I can be far more flexible. Who is it that's in the pocket of the Russians? Bill and Hillary, who took millions to run errands for the clique around Putin. Podesta, who is heavily invested with Russian organized crime in money laundering operations in that nation. I've written about that extensively. Or Donald Trump, who's never met Vladimir Putin. I can see why Putin might prefer Trump. He's actually met Hillary Clinton. There's enough reason right there. He knows she's a liar. He knows that she won't keep her word. He knows that no negotiation with her could she be kept to. And she's bungled everything she's ever touched in her public career. So I can see why he thinks the prospects for peace might be greater with Trump. No one in their right mind can look at Donald Trump and think he's a pushover in negotiations. That's for sure.
You know, Roger Tolstoy said that history would be a wonderful thing if only it were true. Let's talk about the Russians and the way they think. Gorbachev was basically double-crossed by us after they said, hey, listen, Gorby, stop bring down the wall. We're getting out of here. You don't have to worry about NATO anywhere near you. Just don't worry about that. Okay, is that a deal? Shake. Well, that was a double-cross. And we have a country who basically twice within the 20th century, in 1917 and 1991, went through two revolutions. So they're a little skittish. So you think somebody would say, let me at least understand the mindset of these folks. And, you know, Roger, this is the one thing that I really worry about. There's a certain bravura and brio and that Trump tough guy. But who's his James Baker? Who's his Washington connection to let him know, watch out for this guy. I got your back. I mean, Bannon, all these people, more than qualified, brilliant people, family, I got it. But who's watching Trump's back? Because that deep state menace is still there. And if you think I trust Mattis or Flynn, you're out of your mind. These are cold warriors from way back.
Well, first of all, I was not happy that the president went over to Langley and gave this speech to the perps, telling what great guys they were. He needs to understand relatively quickly that currently at the CIA, there's exactly one employee who is loyal to him. That's the guy who just got confirmed as director. From that point down, everybody hates him, hates his worldview, and is leaking against him even as we speak. If I were the president, and I'm not, I would use wiretaps through the FBI to determine who in the Central Intelligence Agency is breaking the law by leaking specifically about General Flynn and so on. No, the deep state was not going to give up the ball easily. They had it their way for 30 years. They have removed at least two presidents who got in their way, those being John Kennedy and later Richard Nixon. If you read my book,
absolutely.
The CIA's role in Watergate is substantial. Look, they're a rogue government unto themselves. And Chuck Schumer went so far as to warn Trump. Don't mess with the intelligence services. They'll get you. They have a dozen ways to get you. And then John Brennan, who I seriously think may be a Saudi mole, actually tells the President of the United States, you better watch your mouth. Really? Really? This is the guy who was once active in the U.S. Communist Party, by the way.
Well,
he was Barack Obama's CIA director. Got to wonder about that, don't you?
But you also look at this right now and understanding the history again. We have this ridiculous Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Potemkin village of Washington and the people and separation of powers. There is an existential threat. You brought up something, by the way, your work and your explanation and explication of Nixon and Watergate. This was a coup. This was basically an attack against the executive. This man was vilified. I'm not standing up for him as being the nicest guy in the world. That's not it. But see, Americans think, Roger, that there's this Manichaean, black and white, apodictic, good guy, bad guy, no grays, good, evil. No, that's not it. This was a man who was basically taken out by these folks. And the best part is when he, by the way, held back and said to Jerry Ford, by the way, Jerry, I'd like to talk to you about that pardon. What pardon? You remember Jerry? Oh, wait, Jerry, weren't you the same guy on the Warren Commission? Weren't you the one with that funny angle of entry thing?
Yeah.
Why don't we tell people about that? And then finally, at least thankfully, the heroism of Jerry Ford. What a wonderful man he was. He's, at long last, our national nightmare is over. He covered his ass. That's why he did this. And look, again, it's not good versus evil, but Roger, since post-World War II, from OSS, from Donovan all the way to Dulles, to these guys, this is a kind of a parallel universe to our government. And NATO is an even more obscure, kind of a non-connected wing that's there for basically, it's a military operation. So I don't want to get too much into this, but does Trump understand this? Does he have somebody there who says, let me explain this to you? Because it sounds almost like this is black bag and
yeah. Yeah, no, it's unfortunately sometimes truth is even more incredible than fiction. I mean, I think what you say is exactly right. Nixon's great sin was not Watergate. Nixon's great sin in the eyes of the military-industrial complex was ending the war in Vietnam faster than they wanted to, making a strategic arms control agreement with the Russians, and opening the door to China. My God, the man's a communist. He's for peace. We've got to stop him. He's for peace. You see, in the election of Nixon, they thought they were going to get the ultimate warmonger. It was bad enough what Johnson had done in Vietnam. They thought they were really going to get to destroy the country. And when Nixon starts moving us towards peace, more peaceful existence with the Russians, and bringing the Chinese in out of the cold, he's a dead man at that point.
And
that's
by
not
the way,
agenda.
And who were the ones that who were the folks? You know, this, all the president's men. This is a paean. This is a hagiography, if you will, to Bob Woodward, a Navy intel guy. See, once
the guy who was briefing Al Haig. I have a 5,000-word monograph on Bob Woodward coming up that you really enjoy, because what I've done is put together a compendium of all his lies. This guy lies more than Hillary Clinton, if such thing is possible. And the fact that he pops up now once again is really annoying, but not as annoying as Carl Bernstein.
Yes.
Who is trying to, I guess, relive the 70s because his shtick of Trump as Nixon doesn't really fit very well. You know, it's old and it's tired. You
know, I've always thought, Roger, what I'd like to be in my next life is, we have the Attorney General, we have the Surgeon General. I want to be the Psychologist General. I want to create mythology And I, first of all, would have to have mainstream media, which is what I have right now. And by the way, going back to Operation Mockingbird, Washington Post, the Graham family, CIA, I want to create a trope and a meme. I want to create just these ideas. And one of the things to go and show you the demonization of Trump and others, but I don't want to get, or of Nixon. Very quickly, this president decided that he was going to do what he said to American voters. He was going to do something about this unchecked, uncontrolled immigration and the like. So he basically utilizes his power. And by the way, yesterday was the 1 month anniversary of his tenure. He decides to issue an executive order, which he has a right to do, or a PDD, which others have done. And Obama used signing statements and a variety of other quasi-legislative things. And he decided to pick 7 countries originally arranged by the Obama administration out of 49 or 50, which is a pretty stupid way if you want to ban Muslims. Why pick 7, and some rather obscure ones at that? And he goes, and basically there's a coup, if you will, by this Ninth Circuit that says you can't do that. And meanwhile, the rest of the country says, help us. Now, we have overnight. Roger, do you know what someone told me, an intel fellow? He said, I knew something goes up when I see protests at airports in a post 9/11 world, at JFK, protests. You can't even sell or give out religious information. This was an inside job, if ever there was one. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I think most of these demonstrations are agitprop, being paid for by George Soros. Sure, there are some sincere people out there, but they become infiltrated by the rock and bottle throwers, those who yell the obscenities and are really seeking to foment violence, and then the violence will be blamed on Trump. You know, Trump brings violent protests to airport. I had a reporter from the New York Times call me last week and said that they've noticed that Donald Trump hasn't been back to New York since he was inaugurated. He's been going to Florida every weekend. Is this because he fears the big demonstrations in New York? Well, first of all, nobody chases Donald Trump out of his hometown. Secondarily, the bigger the demonstrations, the more votes we're winning in the center of the country. So, he doesn't fear this at all. And I think a lot of it, in all honesty, is astroturf. I think it is largely phony.
What do you think is the next thing for us to watch, Roger Stone? What is going to be his next move, knowing what you knew? No, tell us kind of the inside baseball.
I think that you're going to see a very aggressive tax reform package that cuts the corporate tax rate, has a program for inversion, bringing this money back into the country and taxing it, and an across-the-board tax cut for everyone. I think the president understands that if you can revitalize the economy, if you can get the economy moving, it will buy you the time and the resources to fix our other problems. So, and the economy drove this election more than anything else, particularly the lack of jobs in the Rust Belt, and the lack of jobs for people just getting out of college or getting out of trade school, and then there's no place for them to go other than their parents' basement. So, I really think he's going to focus on the economic.
What about you? What are you doing next? Tell me what's next in the pantheon of Roger Stone's subject matters.
Well, look, I would really like this book to hit the New York Times bestseller list.
And why isn't it?
That's an excellent question. I noticed that the list is books 1 through 15, or pardon me, 1 through 20. And I noticed that the last few books had a much lower book scan number than mine. So one wonders how that's possible. I suspect the book I know how many copies it sold. Based on what I saw in the count, it should have been listed. On the other hand, I'm not holding my breath waiting for the New York Times to review this book, because I don't think that's ever going to happen. The way people can help me is to grab a couple copies, give it to your friends or your neighbors or your family. It's a great read. It is, I think, the definitive inside story of how Donald Trump pulled off a political miracle.
But I also love the inside story about you. I've loved the Atwaters. I love the Knopfzingers. I love the people who are the men behind the person who says, I'm going to orchestrate. I'm the conductor. You're the musician. It's your message. And I find that fascinating because what you did was you have to be able to keep your ear to the ground, to know what the American people want, and then to advise, accordingly. And I hope that the administration, maybe not officially, because you're a hot commodity and wherever you go, controversy is not far away, which is great. But I hope that he ultimately pays you the due that is coming because I have followed you. I know what you've done. You've been indefatigable. You have been his most trusted, not defender. He doesn't need defending, but explainer. Somebody to try to chip through this. I mean, the anti-Trump rhetoric is something I've never seen before. So,
yeah, they've created this caricature of him that is not him. Look, I'm just proud to have been involved. He's been my friend 40 years. I think he could be one of our greatest presidents if he will not forget how he got here and who the constituents are that got him here. Now you're in this phase where all these Ivy League jerks show up to kiss his ass and tell him that they were with him the whole time. Right. And, oh, by the way, I'd be the ambassador to Spain or wherever it is. That's the dangerous thing. I frankly think that, I'd rather have a snake in the grass than an asp in the bosom. It's the Republicans you got to keep an eye on here.
That is precisely right. And by the way, remember what the great Tip O'Neill's father said. Not Tip O'Neill, but his father said after Tip's first loss. He says, all politics is local. And what he's done is he's gone to those people. Look, I saw those crowds. Only a fool cannot realize that he's a rock star. And Roger Stone, I want everybody to, if ever you want to read, not only just a great story about you, but how this is carved, what you went through, and what an integral role you played in this. The book is called The Making of the President, 2016, How Donald Trump Orchestrated a Revolution by Roger Stone. It's a great stocking stuffer, fine for dad or grad. Christmas is just around the corner. Makes a great gift. And you can get it on Kindle and ebook and hard copy. This is an absolute wonderful book. And Roger, I am honored to have had you with me today. Thank you so very much, my dear friend.
Delighted to be here, Lionel, anytime. Many thanks.
Thank you so much. Roger Stone, thank you, sir.